Volume I crisis in the air. Day 1 to day 11. Day 1 fall. The sword formation slowly descended, approaching that mountain. Wen Chao said, "Look at this black gas. Tsk. Hostile, right? Is it thick with grievances? Even our Wen family can't do anything about it. We can only encircle it and forbid people from entering or exiting. This is still the daytime. At night, there will really be anything inside. If a living person enters here, even with his soul, there is no return, and he will never want to come out." He grabbed Wei Wuxian's hair and said, word by word, with a sardonic smile, "You too will never want to come out." After saying that, he lifted Wei Wuxian off. The bound Wei Wuxian's face was pale, and he quickly fell from the air towards the ground where the harsh qi filled the air, and the Wen clan cultivator in mid-air and the rampant laughter imperialized his sword. Wei Wuxian couldn't see anything on the ground, and on his way down, with his face facing the sky, he looked at the rampant Wen clan cultivator, and his eyes swept over with cruelty. Even though the bushes mitigated some of the impact when he landed, Wei Wuxian, who had been weakened for a long time, still lost his sanity the moment he hit the ground. Dust and smoke rolled up, and this black land nourished by corpses returned to a lifeless, dead silence. Day to escape. Wei Wuxian was woken up by the walkers when he was not fully awake. Looking around, the walkers have become an encirclement. Immediately a jolt, wake up and return to the soul. At the moment, the crisis was everywhere. Where can he be allowed to be in a daze? Wei Wuxian jumped up violently, unarmed, not to mention his hands were bound in front of him. He could only rely on his shoulders to force his way through this pile of mindless corpses, and ran out of the encirclement in a brisk pace. He only felt a dull pain on his back, falling down from a high place, not knowing how many bones were broken. At this moment, Wei Wuxian's spiritual energy was empty, his face was like gold paper, and his feet were floating, like a headless fly. Staggering and running for a while, Wei Wuxian's sharp eyes saw the ground inserted a rusty weapon. Do not know whether it is a knife or sword. Does not look like a mortal product. The end is just thrown here to rust. No wonder this is a mass grave with no return. Wen family cultivator's rope is not ordinary people's home with so good to break. Wei Wuxian ran all the way over. See, sharp things also tried to borrow things to untie the rope, but none of them succeeded. Close to the blade, Wei Wuxian forced out a little bit of the only remaining spiritual power into this unknown weapon. The knot in the blade on a wipe. Finally, his unlocked hands, less a layer of shackles, also means that more than a heavy opportunity to live on. And this object without follow-up spiritual power supplement, only bright for a moment, will return to the previous state. Seeing the surrounding corpses surrounded by the smell again, Wei Wuxian angrily heckled twice, thinking, I must not finish here. Thinking of the Lotus Dock, Zhang Mianfeng and Mrs. Yu, Zhang Cheng's Jindan, and all the heroic deeds of the Wen family back then, Wei Wuxian only had a piece of viciousness in his eyes, and gritted his teeth and drew out his weapon and swung it at the corpses, which could not be used to make any spiritual power, and was considered to be a good weapon. In the end, Wei Wuxian, by virtue of the body method, hard from the corpses to kill a gap with a body full of blood, bear the pain to run away. This place is filled with severe qi, walking corpses all over the place, surrounded by bloody trees, corpse mud and black soil. If this was a mass grave, there shouldn't be any living people here. Wei Wuxian's clothes were ragged, covered with blood, and he didn't dare to stop even if his skin was broken, but he was tired and hurt for the past few days. His body was at the end of its strength, and the weapon that he picked up casually was thrown away when he was running away, and the surrounding area was still a piece of walking corpses that he couldn't hide from. Wei Wuxian only had to struggle to climb up a higher dead tree. After sitting down, see the corpses do not come up. The taut string loosened for a moment and finally fell asleep. Just in this kind of weird place is to fall asleep. Wei Wuxian can only tightly hold the tree trunk. Do not dare to withdraw force. Day 3 sleep. The corpses under the tree smelled the scent of a living person and kept gathering under the tree. But the low-ranked corpses had stiff limbs and little ability to think, so they could not climb up. Wei Wuxian was still sleeping on the tree. Temporarily safer. Day for transportation. Some of the walkers under the tree left, but one of the mutated walkers started attacking the tree trunk, and the others started to follow suit. Wei Wuxian was awakened by the vibration. His eyes were confused, and when he looked down, he saw that a large number of corpses under the tree were attacking the trunk of the tree where he was. Wei Wuxian was shocked before he suddenly remembered that he had been thrown into a mass grave by Wen dog. Closing his eyes, Wei Wuxian stretched his limbs a little, and felt that his strength had recovered a little, and broke a sharp and strong branch from the tree. Not caring about the hunger in his stomach, Wei Wuxian jumped down from the tree, and stepped on the corpses and walked quickly. The surrounding corpses could not react. Some of them were still hitting the tree trunk, while some of them chased after Wei Wuxian in the direction of his escape. Wei Wuxian didn't know how long he had been running, but there were always walking corpses and spirits on the mass grave. He looked around and noticed the leaves on the trees. Could it be that this mass grave actually has a sunrise? Putting this idea down first, Wei Wuxian nimbly went up the tree, hugging the trunk and resting with his eyes closed. Day 5 food. This time, Wei Wuxian did not rest for a long time and opened his eyes again. His spirit recovered a little, but the injuries on his body were hard to recover in this kind of place. A piece of gold star in front of his eyes. Wei Wuxian almost fell from the tree. Fortunately, he raised his hand in time to hook the trunk to stabilize his body. Otherwise, the tree is still under the walking corpse. It would not be easy to fall down. Wei Wuxian was lucky that he didn't run into any more corpses that would hit the tree. For 5 days, Wei Wuxian had not eaten any food and had not touched any water. Wei Wuxian's body was already weak and frail, and he had to run away for a few days. So his appearance was in a terrible state. Wei Wuxian knew that he didn't have any spiritual cultivation, so he had to replenish food and water. Leaning on the tree, Wei Wuxian hesitantly picked a few leaves from the tree, but he did not realize that he recalled the lotus stalk, as well as the Wen family that had destroyed everything in the past, and it was a monstrous hatred that was pent up in his chest, and the leaves in his palms were viciously pinched and crushed. Wei Wuxian closed his eyes, his chest rose and fell violently, revealing his rippling state of mind. Opening his eyes again, Wei Wuxian's pupils were filled with blood, and he stuffed those crushed leaves into his mouth and chewed them without hesitation. The leaves nourished by the corpses in the mass graves tasted sweet and astringent with the smell of blood and corpses. It was difficult to swallow, but he could only rely on it to wrap his stomach now. If not, Wei Wuxian might not have been killed by the walking corpses, but starved to death. No matter what, Wei Wuxian, must not die. He must not let Wen Dog have his way. Wei Wuxian's eyes burned with determined hatred. After chewing some leaves to eat, Wei Wuxian hugged the tree trunk again and rested, thinking that since there were trees in this mass grave, it meant that there should be a water source in this hellish place. If there was water, it would be more likely for him to live. He will definitely make Wen Dog pay the price. Day 6 Seek. Wei Wuxian woke up and would look down to see how many corpses had gathered, laughing to himself that he was not used to it. But today, after he landed on the ground, he found that the corpses chasing after him were a lot less. Is it because he is stained with the corpse mud ghost gas of this mass grave? In the view of this corpse, it is also counted as the same kind? Wei Wuxian thought to himself. Feeling that he had regained some strength, Wei Wuxian picked a handful of leaves and swallowed them. He barely managed to cover up the wounds scratched by the corpses on his body, and then looked at his own cloth shirt, which had been torn and tattered after a few days of crawling in the mountain of corpses and muddy water. Taking 2 long breaths, Wei Wuxian bypassed the corpses on the road and walked slowly. Today, he was going to look for a water source, even though he didn't know if the water in this mass grave was corpse blood water. Corpse miasma and ghost qi shrouded the mass grave for many years, making this place a bit of a ghostly maze. Wei Wuxian fled these days, but actually did not go far around. Perhaps these days running around, Wei Wuxian somewhat used to the body injuries and this forest miasma. Along the forest slowly judging the direction of the water source, while also shun away a few pieces of more complete rags clothing. After walking for a while, Wei Wuxian realized that the surrounding corpses had an increasing trend. There was a faint sound of water in his ears. Wei Wuxian was happy, and he stepped forward, turned the corner and saw that there was indeed a river, but a pool of foul-smelling corpse water was flowing. Expectedly, Wei Wuxian's face was calm and terrible. Casually threw the cloth on the branch, stepped on the broken neck of a walker and climbed up the tree. It was still safe in the tree. Wei Wuxian sat on a high tree branch and looked down at the ground. His eyes were in a trance. His eyes were dim. He suddenly remembered some past events. When he was young and first arrived at the lotus dock, he was scared by the dog in the middle of the night and fell into the tree, and he could not climb the branch and fell down, and his senior sister caught him with her thin hands. Suddenly a loose hand, Wei Wuxian reacted when he had already fallen from the tree, solidly smashed down a few walkers, and then quickly surged. A bunch of walkers pounced on him and surrounded him as a group. When Wei Wuxian climbed up the tree again, he would only hold the trunk of the tree and stare blankly. Will sleep but not sleep. Want to dream but not dream. Day 7 Memories. Wei Wuxian also do not know when he fell asleep last night. Is not sleeping at all, or did not wake up at all. It seems like a dream but not a dream, seems like a memory but not a memory. A lot of memories surging endlessly, in the brain back to visit. There is a gentle man and a woman holding the young him. There was the elder sister with open arms and a warm voice under the tree with the lights shining. And there was Zhang Cheng's face full of dislike but helping him to block the dog. And confusing memories surfaced. The images in his mind were refuted and the sounds were intertwined. So noisy, so noisy. Wei Wuxian held his head with one hand. One hand tightly gripped a branch. His fingertips became blue and white because of excessive force. He showed a painful color. His mouth overflowed with a hoarse low roar. Until he remembered the cold timber, humming a serene and melodious melody. All the noisy memories came to a halt, and only this soft singing voice circled back in Wei Wuxian's mind. Wei Wuxian relaxed his tightly knit brows and murmured a low voice. Good sounding. What is the name of this tune? Someone whispered something, but unfortunately he didn't hear it. With this tune surrounding his mind, Wei Wuxian fell asleep in the tree with a slight smile. Day 8 end. Awakening again. Wei Wuxian didn't know the color of the sky, but was in full spirits, only he didn't remember much of yesterday's events. He took down a few pieces of cloth hanging on the branches and jumped down from the tree, following the method of the day before to find other water sources. After a few searches, Wei Wuxian actually found a deep pool with a cleaner water source. Wei Wuxian guarded around, stretched out his hands and cupped a handful of water, looking at the more clear pool water, should be able to use. Wei Wuxian also cannot care so much. A few times to remove the rags on the body, slender body did not enter the pool water. The water of the cold pool was cool and piercing. His body shivered, looked at the injury lines all over his body, and rubbed a few times of gray mud carelessly, roughly cleaning the wounds. Then closing his eyes, his knuckles tightly gouged the green stones at the edge of the tam, holding his breath as he dove down. The ice-cold pool water did not exceed the top of his head, and his black hair fluttered recklessly in the water. Wei Wuxian's mind was in turmoil. Uncle Zhang brought him back from wandering the streets and living in the wind back then, letting the lonely man have a family again. If the golden Dan is gone, it is gone, and since it is gone, it is as if it has never existed. Eyebrows stretched out, Wei Wuxian resurfaced, propped up with both hands, sat on the edge of the pool. After bathing, Wei Wuxian felt a few points better. Putting on those more intact cloth shirts and relaxing a little, Wei Wuxian got up and resumed wearing a handsome smile, as good as before. He climbed up a tall tree by the tan and sat firmly on the branch. But the moment he closed his eyes, his smile dissipated and his brows tightened. But the golden Dan is gone. How can he get out of the mass grave, this dead land, and how to make Wen dog pay the price? He has to find another way out. Day 9 solution. Wei Wuxian sat on the tree, his brows locked, clueless, still clueless and helpless. Back then, many cultivators had failed to remove the mass grave, and now he had no Jindan, and could not run his spiritual power at all. Even if he ran out of the mass grave, it was as difficult as climbing up to heaven. If it is not alone, under the good luck can temporarily stay in the high tree to rest, afraid also has long lost his life. What's more, even if he got out, what could he do? With his current situation, how can he take revenge? He had no Jindan, no spiritual power, and no support. He looked around this miasma-ridden, ghostly, sunless mass grave. The nonsense of that youthful disobedience surfaced in his mind. But he had concerns. Could he afford the price he would pay for that path? Would the Yunmeng Jiang Clan still accept him, the first disciple of the crooked path? But Mrs. Yu's determined back was destroyed by the fire lotus dock. Zhang Cheng disheveled, pleading for death. There is a firelight illuminated by 2 lines of tears flowed over the face of a scene and a pile of tragedy in front of his eyes, hovering, lingering. Gizan Wen. Black mist surrounded his body. An extreme hatred surfaced on the youth's face. He had to take revenge. Day 10 yes. Wei Wuxian stood at the top of a tall tree. He looked towards the place where the black fog was thickest in the mountains, estimated the bearing distance, then slid down the tree and took a step towards that side. He thought about it again and again, finally made up his mind to do it. Also thought about what kind of price he has to pay. He was already at the end of the road, so why should he worry about it? Wei Wuxian wore a bland smile and walked step by step towards the depths of the black mist. There is no more bustling Yanguan road. At least he still has a single wooden bridge, even if one road to the black. No one on his side, no road behind him, for that obsession. All alone. Day 11 cave. If a cultivator intends to contact Ghost Key, unless he gives up his spiritual cultivation, once the Ghost Key and his own aura converge in the Danshan, they will clash, and the Danshan will be shattered for life, or the body will explode and die. Wei Wuxian thought back to some of the forbidden book remnants he had once read, and now that he had dissected out his Jindan, practicing this method was more than appropriate. Ghost practitioners use evil ki to manipulate dead souls and corpses, but before that, he had to find some kind of medium. Wei Wuxian traveled to the depths of the black fog. His visual range was very narrow, and he could not find a safe place anymore. Perhaps because this area was too heavy in yin qi, many corpses had some spiritual intelligence, and the trees were full of corpses, which smelled the scent of living people and jumped down from the trees and sped towards him. Wei Wuxian cursed his negligence, and hurriedly covered his mouth and nose. His figure skimmed over them rapidly and slightly, but there were still a large number of corpses chasing after him. Not long ago, Wei Wuxian saw that the black fog in front of him was as thick as ink-like substance, and the eerie and heavenly ghostly hostile atmosphere made the walkers not dare to come near. Wei Wuxian could only vaguely recognize the outline of a cave, and there was not a single walker around. Wei Wuxian's footsteps did not stop, and he turned his head to look back at the number of walking corpses behind him, but he tripped over something under his feet. He roughly swept. This thing stained with black mud is a half of the slant planted in the soil of the slender tube body, looks like a branch. Pipe music? Musical instrument? Medium? Wei Wuxian's heart opened up. A voice told him that this was it. As if it was predestined, Wei Wuxian bent down and pulled out the music pipe, got up quickly, turned his head and crashed into the black fog that was as thick as substance. The surrounding corpses unwillingly surrounded the outside, but did not dare to approach. The concentration of yin qi in this place increased greatly, instantly drilling into Wei Wuxian's body from his 7 orifices and pores, and the yin coldness instantly spread all over his body. Wei Wuxian was stimulated by this yin coldness and shivered. His footsteps lurched and his oppressed body nearly collapsed. He could not restrain a hiss in his throat. After entering this gloomy black mist for only 3 breaths, Wei Wuxian was already bleeding from his 7 orifices and covered in blood. He opened his eyes, and in front of him was a blurred and distorted blood color. When he vaguely realized that he had already entered the cave, only then did he feel somewhat adapted to this black fog, half leaning against the rock wall. With one hand grasping the objects he had just picked up in a death grip, he slowly groped for the stone wall and walked forward. Yin qi around the body is getting thicker and thicker. After walking for about a quarter of an hour, Wei Wuxian didn't know where he had gone. He was no longer able to walk out any step, coughed out a mouthful of blood, and slid down the rock wall to sit on the ground. Wei Wuxian didn't care that much, casually wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, tightly gripped the long pipe in his hand, eyes closed tightly, and fainted. But what he didn't realize was that after the object was stained with the blood he coughed out, a touch of black gas wrapped around it and then annihilated. Volume 2 Practicing the Way of the Demon. 12th to 52nd Day. State your feelings for the sake of the people. Wei Wuxian woke up from his dream. It was pitch black in front of his eyes. He wiped his eyes and looked around. There was no light in the cave, and the yin qi filled the room. It was very gloomy. When his eyes adjusted for a moment, Wei Wuxian stared and scrutinized. Although the surroundings were bleak, but he could hear the sound of water dripping. He looked towards the direction of the sound of water, and he could vaguely see the silhouette of a pool of water. Wei Wuxian struggled to get up. His flesh and sinews were in severe pain. He was instantly dizzy and fell back to his original position, unable to struggle. When he fell to sit down, his palm pressed down on the long tube. Then he remembered what was in his hand and lowered his head to examine the object carefully. Unfortunately, this long tube was stained and filled with corpse mud inside and outside, so it was impossible to see what was going on. Wei Wuxian slowly moved to the edge of the pool of water to clean it out. His fingers touched a few holes on the tube, and finally saw the object clearly. It is a wind instrument, black, cool in the hand, non-wood, non-jade, do not know the material. Wei Wuxian carefully touched the flute body inscriptions, identified the word Chen love, Chenqing. Wei Wuxian read these 2 words in his lips a few times, some like it, gently caressed a few times. Wei Wuxian put it on the edge of the tan. He then jumped directly into this pool of water to wash his body. The blood stains on his body spread out in the water and then gradually faded away. Wei Wuxian propped up his hands and came out of the water to sit back at the edge of the tam. His wet and torn shirt could barely fit on his slender and slim body. He picked up Kanzayo and slowly sent it to his lips, blew a few tunes to try, and then blew a poignant tune and stopped abruptly. Wei Wuxian, blowing surprisingly found in front of the black fog gradually entangled into a strand, was mobilized by the sound of the flute, and some inexplicable connection with his mind. He immediately stopped blowing in shock, the black fog back to its original state. Wei Wuxian looked at the hands of the Chenqing, guessing that perhaps because this flute in the mass grave buried for a long time, itself is also contaminated with the evil nature. Heaven help me, Wei Wuxian thought, holding Chenqing tightly. his face smiling slightly cold, sitting cross-legged. Wei Wuxian had a crazier idea. So what if I don't have Jindan? If I can mobilize all this yin qi and fuse it into a yin dan, mobilizing yin qi for my use, what's the difference? He began to try to mobilize yin qi into his body with Chen Yi. The rich yin qi invaded his dantian from the scar on his abdomen. At that instant, a large amount of yin qi violently clashed with the only remaining spiritual energy in his dantian. The severe pain coming from his dantian made Wei Wuxian's hand shake and break a syllable. The yin qi instantly dispersed in the dantian rushing around in his body. The wood has been turned into a boat. The yin qi has already entered his body. Wei Wuxian knew that stopping here would only lead to death. He spat a mouthful of blood out, endured the pain and continued to blow the Chen Yi to lead the yin qi to the dantian early convergence. Wei Wuxian. But it's just a pain in the dantian. What kind of pain is this? 2 nights and a day of stripping have survived. This little absorption still cannot endure? Although he said so, but those yin qi in his limbs and bones everywhere running around, reckless, driving away his residual spiritual energy, and even drilled into his internal organs, rushing around, the taste cannot be pleasant. Wei Wuxian's hand could no longer hold Chenqing. Chenqing crashed down. Wei Wuxian also collapsed to the ground. The intense pain made him unconsciously curl up and moan, cold sweat all over his body. He clutched his head, his face was full of pain. His mouth hissed in a low voice, Wei Wuxian, you will not and cannot die here. I want to kill you all. I want to kill you all. Filled with hatred, Wei Wuxian insisted on pouring yin qi into himself day after day, enduring the pain to mobilize the yin qi and converge it into the shape of a yin dan at the dantian. Unfortunately, it only solidified into a prototype, and before it could truly condense into a dan, Wei Wuxian had already fainted. Fig. Dead end. Wei Wuxian awoke with a start. His eyes widened and he breathed in sharply, then immediately grabbed Chen Yi and continued to guide the yin qi to gather towards the dantian. When he looked into the dantian internally, he saw that the yin dan, which was already half completed, was vaguely trending towards dispersing, forcibly stripping the jindan and cutting the jindan's connection with the meridians. How could there be no damage to the dantian? Not to mention the fact that holding yin qi in one's body was a self-seeking and unprecedented move. Wei Wuxian's brain was chaotic. His mouth unconsciously murmured, and then desperately mobilized more yin qi to the dantian, and the master and disciple stabilized the shape of the yin dan. Under the stalemate, Wei Wuxian did not notice that his face was filled with death and despair until his strength was exhausted and it was difficult to maintain. Then he unwillingly let go. If he couldn't even walk down this path, if he died so quickly, then what was the point of talking about revenge? Wei Wuxian clenched his hands into fists, decadently and painfully pounding the ground. The skin on his hands cracked and bloody, blood dripping down his fists into the pool water, blooming into blood lotuses. Immortal soul, that can be carved out of a person. The remnants of the text surfaced in his mind. Evil key, engraved into the soul, causes all ghosts to be in awe. Evil key carves into the soul. Evil key carves into the soul. Wei Wuxian's eyes were devoid of any expression, repeating these 4 words without any consciousness. Then he grasped Kanzayo, like a dying person grasping the last line of life. He looked at it with death. The bottom of his eyes were all the color of madness, and the corner of his lips carried an incredible delight. Evil, carved soul, ha ha ha. The youth who threw back his head and laughed was full of blood and tears. Wen dog, Wen dog. I, Wei Wuxian, will definitely make you have no way to beg for life and no way to beg for death. With a pale and eerie smile on his face, word by word, he could not wait to kill them by 1,000 cuts for eternity. Reintroducing Kanzayo to his lips, he played a piece of eerie and ghostly flute music, accompanied by the handsome youth's crazy and horrifying behavior. Circling around in this uninhabited mass grave cavern, no one knew. Yin qi spread down his spine and into his brain. Wei Wuxian regulated the yin qi and slowly immersed it within his soul. Wei Wuxian's veins rippled, cold sweat broke out. That was from the depths of the soul, unspeakable pain, that is, the torture of hell, but also so, his soul to bear the pain. The flesh is also stiff, almost dead, but he must continuing this crazy self-destructive behavior, continuing to personally immerse his soul in strands of yin qi, watching his soul smeared with yin blackness inch by inch, becoming a half-life, half-dead soul. He desperately tried to stuff a heavy cloud of yin qi into his body, witnessing every tendon and vein in his body being infused with yin qi, floating on the surface of his skin. Like a monster, he smiled eerily, his blood and tears not yet dried. After all, there was no way back. Yin qi was flowing inside his soul and body, Wei Wuxian was already in pain to the point of numbness. Even the pain of stripping the Jindan was not as hard as a moment of such soul erosion. So cold. Wei Wuxian curled up and gradually closed his heavy eyes. Lunar caustic loan word. Less whimsical. Saying it's impossible is impossible. Wen Qi frowned and chided Wei Wuxian, who was pestering him, waving his hand and trying to drive him away. I've read your articles, I know you can do it. Wei Wuxian continued to block in front of her, still shyly wearing a smiling face. Wei Wuxian, although I've written a few things, an article is an article, and a hand is a hand. Even I'm not 10% sure, Warmth said. When Wei Wuxian heard this, his smile increased instead of decreasing, and he pretended to be surprised. Not 10% sure, doesn't that mean you are also sure? Great physician Wen, don't you want to give it a try? You might start a new medical art. Start what creation? How many fools in this world would be willing to give away their cultivation to others? You're the one who's stupid. If that kid doesn't have his Jindan, you're going to dissect your own to him. So who's going to dissect yours to you if you don't have your Jindan? Wenqi's tail tone drew up a few degrees. She didn't understand how the youth in front of her could manage to be so generous for others. Obviously, he himself was also gifted and youthful. Why would he be willing and stalking and begging himself to dissect the golden Dan to someone else? Hearing Warmth's words, Wei Wuxian paused for a moment, his eyes flickering, then replied in a relaxed tone, what about someone like me? Even if I don't have the golden Dan, there are still other paths I can go down. Wei Wuxian inclined his head to look into the room, his smile converging back, turning back to meet Wenqi's slightly puzzled gaze, and then said, but he's a person who can't do it. I know him. He is too good and strong, too focused on the gains and losses in this area. Cultivation is his life. If the Yunmeng Jiang Clan's head of a clan can only be an ordinary person who is not up to par, then his life will be over. After listening to these remarks, Wen King also looked at the direction of the house and did not respond. After a long time, she raised her eyes to look at him. Wei Wuxian was still looking at her expectantly. Wenqi turned around and left. Wei Wuxian looked at her departing figure, stepping away and preparing to continue chasing after her when her voice came. That kid will be asleep for 3 days from the time he was stabbed with the needle. I'll go prepare some medicine. Wei Wuxian froze. There were 2 words in his lips that dissipated into the wind, and he didn't know if the other party had heard them. 3 days later, Wei Wuxian successfully tricked Jiang Cheng to a mountain near Yiling. Jiang Cheng was blindfolded by Wei Wuxian, according to the other side in the mountain, that nonsense method of walking around, and finally wandered to the 3 of them here when the sky is already dusk. Wen King was another needle down. Jiang Cheng fell down senselessly. The underhanded Wen Ning nimbly caught him, put him flat on the bushes on the ground, fed him a bottle of anesthetic. Wei Wuxian saw the situation, also poured down the anesthetic, and then softly fell to the ground. As the moon hung in the middle of the sky, Wei Wuxian returned to his senses. Wen Qi and Wen Ning were looking at him, the former's brows furrowed, the latter's face showing worry. Wei Wuxian thought it didn't work. His heart sank. There were some unexpected circumstances. Your Jindan is still inside you. Wen frowned as she looked at Wei Wuxian's eyes, lost in thought. Wei Wuxian's body was still a little numb, so it was inconvenient to move his body around randomly, so his eyes looked at Wen King suspiciously. Wen King pursed her lips and said with a grave expression, Wei Wuxian, I must remind you of one thing. What? He inquired with a gaze gesture. You'd better give up before it's too late, if you're going to keep the original plan. What's wrong? He was a bit anxious, wondering why Warmth would suddenly say such out-of-the-blue words at this moment. When dissecting and exchanging the gold Dan, the master of the gold Dan, Warmth always somewhat did not want to say the latter words. What? Wei Wuxian looked anxious. One must remain absolutely conscious to guide the Jindan and the aura, otherwise, the Jindan may become unstable and dissipate after removal. Wei Wuxian sniffed in a bit of a trance and collected his expression, nodding at them with a smile a moment later. You really want to continue? Wen looked at him in shock. Not long after, the effect of the anesthetic on Wei Wuxian's body passed a bit and he felt that he regained a bit of mobility. He nodded slightly and replied with a still very relaxed tone, I thought I couldn't do it, so it turns out that it's just for me to be awake. What's the big deal? Come on. Seeing this, Wen Ning hurriedly helped him to half sit up. Wei Wuxian had a knife mark at the small of his back, still dripping blood. Wen King couldn't bear to incline his head. Just what kind of righteousness in his bosom could make him do this? Good. She didn't know how she said this word. Moving her hand again, Wen Cheng forced herself to hold back her feelings of injustice and cut his wound deeper. Wei Wuxian couldn't care less about the pain of that little wound, and pinching his hands, he mobilized his entire body's spiritual energy to converge towards his dantian. The jindan was supported by the spiritual energy and slowly floated out from the wound. First, use your spiritual energy to run 3 circumference days in his body and try to merge with his spiritual energy. Warmth stepped in just in time to protect Wei Wuxian with her spiritual energy, keeping him awake. Wei Wuxian's consciousness was a bit disoriented, and he subconsciously obeyed her words, pouring the spiritual energy in his jindan from Jiang Cheng's danshan. The two of them practiced the Yunmeng Jiang Clan's heart method, and their spiritual energy operated similarly, but the process of fusion was still long and tortuous. The golden dan was suspended between the two of them, linked by a spiritual bridge. Only the fluctuations of their spiritual energy were very different. The spiritual energy in Jiang Cheng's body gradually solidified, swimming happily in his limbs and bones. Wei Wuxian's spiritual energy gradually faded. The surging spiritual energy gradually lost its activity, turning into a pool of stagnant water, no longer able to startle any waves. 2 nights and 1 day. The spiritual power and the spiritual power in Jiang Cheng's body completely fused. Wen roughly pinched Jiang Cheng's mouth, but then used the soft spiritual power to help Wei Wuxian send the golden dan towards Jiang Cheng's mouth. Wei Wuxian slowly moved his jindan to Jiang Cheng's danshan and operated the Jiang family's gong method. The golden elixir operated as normal in Jiang Cheng's body. Wei Wuxian finally let go of his heart and looked at the Wen family siblings with a hint of relief and gratitude before falling into complete darkness. Thank you, Taoist external alchemy. Wei Wuxian was unconscious, but the chaotic yin qi even followed his veins and merged into the yin dan in his danshan. The yin dan gradually solidified, and a vortex swirled around the yin qi here, converging into his danshan, and was taken in by the yin dan. The only remaining spiritual energy was stored in his heart chakra. The thick ink yin qi that swept over the mass grave diminished and converged in Wei Wuxian's yin dan. The dan was completed. The corpses in the mass grave were subdued by the pressure of this unprecedented yin dan, unable to move, trembling as they tried to move away from the cave. Not long after, the sky above the mass grave was covered by black mist again, and no one knew of any strange movements that had occurred here. Volume 3 Back on Earth, Day 53 to Day 70. Day 53 Awakening. Wei Wuxian's godless eyes gradually regained their animation, and what was reflected in his vision was the shadowy roof of the cave that was several feet high. When the yin dan condensed, it had absorbed a lot of yin qi here, and now Wei Wuxian was able to see without any obstacles, but he could only lie quietly here at the moment, and it was difficult for him to move, with only his slightly heaving chest left to prove that he was still alive. His internal vision probed into the yin dan in his danshan and said, I, Wei Wuxian, really don't deserve to die. Although he said this, he had no joy. Instead, a scene from the past flashed before his eyes. Wei Wuxian's eyes were dull and his face was stoic. For a long time, he rolled a circle to re-enter the tan, once again carefully washed the body's stains, but still cannot help the potential water to cover his face. Look mournful. Only after collecting all the color of pain, he casually wrapped his slender and scarred body with a cloth, picked up Chenqing from the edge of the pool, and let his wet black hair casually drape behind his head. Wei Wuxian walked towards the bright cave entrance with a steady pace. The rare sunlight from the mass grave shone at the entrance of the cave, and the light shone on the dust, forming a pillar of light. He stopped silently at the entrance of the cave, the tip of his foot just a hair's breadth away from touching the sunlight. He gently raised his left hand, reaching forward, but when his fingertips were about to touch the pillar of light, his hand quickly retracted. He seemed to have remembered something. The corner of his lips tugged hard before he sketched out a shallow arc. Obviously, his eyes were lifeless, but the arc at the edge of his lips was expanding, obviously surviving in the world. His body was shrouded in death and despair, just like he was clearly Wei Wuxian, but not like Wei Wuxian. His slightly trembling hand gently moved forward again, trying to touch the light. The sunlight brushed by, and his fingertips were slightly warm. Wei Wuxian Dao's sanity seemed to be fully awake in this instant. His eyes resumed their splendor, and the curves of his lips were soft. He couldn't wait to step out of the dark cave and into the sunlight, and the Chenqing he held in his hand turned flexibly in his fingertips. The sunlight shone on his handsome greenish-white face, and he stretched out his hand to cover the light for his eyes, which had not yet adjusted to the light, and stretched out his body in the warm light of day. He was still the same handsome Wei Wuxian. The sunlight in the mass grave was rare, and the cloudy sky gradually hid the sunlight. He lowered his head and pressed his still warm fingers close to his chest. The smile was flat. No matter what. No matter what. He was Wei Wuxian. Raising his eyes again, he then noticed the walking corpses around him. And these walking corpses were no longer in the same posture as they were when they were chasing him. Instead, They panicked and retreated along with his advancing footsteps. Indeed, the corners of his lips curled up in satisfaction, and he stopped playing the Chenqing in his hand, placing it to his lips and blowing. The tune calmed down, and one by one the walkers began to neatly line up, until he glanced out of the corner of his eye at the walker wearing the tattered and torn flame yang tattoo. As if his heart was clenched, the flute sound came to an abrupt halt, and the group of walkers stood still, slowly lowering Chen Yi. His head tilted over a subtle arc as he looked at the corpse, a shallow smile on his pale face, a shadowy blood color filling his eyes. Eerie and handsome. When the flute sounded for the second time, the tune was secretive and sharp, and the yin dan mobilized the yin qi to work rapidly in his body. A group of walking corpses lunged towards the walking corpse wearing the fiery yang tattoo. Fetid blood, rotting flesh, and broken bones flew across this piece of heaven and earth. The corpse fell apart in an instant, being brutally dismantled by the sharp claws of its own kind, and a purple and black corpse flower bloomed in the midst of the corpses. Wei Wuxian blew his Chenqing and watched this scene, a vague and unknown pleasure spreading in his heart. His eyes colored with bloodthirsty killing intent. An image suddenly flashed before his eyes, but he didn't recall the scene. But it was enough to restore his sanity. His hands stagnated, and he nearly lost his grip on Kenzio. Cultivating the Tao is also cultivating the heart. What the Tao needs, the heart turns to. Immortal cultivators have their hearts directed towards immortality, and ghost cultivators naturally have their hearts directed towards ghosts. But the people who control ghosts, this is not respect for the dead, do not respect the spirits. This way and all the spirit of life contrary will be condemned by heaven. Life is difficult to long, and resentment riots difficult to control, very easy to go mad, destroying the mind. Murderous. Yes, there is no way in the world can become a great master of good things casually, but he has no way out, that is, give up this life. What is the harm? If you want to pay any price, just come and get it. As for the rest, after living for so many years, how could he not even control himself? He had thought so, but at this time, he is also in the heart of the shock. Cannot help but ask himself in the heart of the party just did what? Holding on to Chen Yi, Wei Wuxian held his forehead and frowned to calm his mind. No, I cultivate this road is to take revenge. So my party just now was originally to go along with the heart. Thinking about this, Wei Wuxian finally stabilized his mind and continued to move forward. 55th day runes. I can't imagine that this place can actually bear fruit. It seems that I was unlucky for going in the wrong direction earlier. There were some unknown fruits on top of a short tree on one side. Wei Wuxian was not afraid. He had eaten all the leaves of the rotten tree. But he was still afraid of this. Tasted a few under the stomach, the taste of sweet and sour. Then the rotten leaves can be much more delicious. Wei Wuxian hand and picked a few more, running down the mountain. He also did not know how long he stayed on the mountain, but expected these days. Zhang Cheng, probably busy rebuilding Lotus Dock, also could not imagine that he was in the mass grave, and he is currently best not to meet with any acquaintances, being burdened with blood revenge. It was also time to leave this corpse mountain and make a trip back to Earth. Every time he walked for a while, Wei Wuxian had to climb up the tree to check the direction. The surrounding corpses were no longer a threat to him at all, and some of them would retreat backward on their own when they encountered Wei Wuxian. It was also at this time that Wei Wuxian realized that even if he didn't use Chen Yi, some simple commands could command the lowly walking corpses. Although he had bathed, the cloths on his body were tattered and torn, and he carried a ghost flute, Chenqing, and a dozen or so taels of loose silver left behind by some unknown walkers, as well as a stack of yellow paper with talismans and seals that he had picked up. With nothing else to do, he took the stack of talisman seals and looked at them. They were the common talisman seals of the Zuanmen sect to drive away evil spirits. They were of no use to him now, if he had to say so. They were not as effective as if he just stood there by himself. All talismans and formations under the world have their own laws of operation, both yin and yang. If we can find the laws of this talisman and this formation, we can easily find the weak points and break them. Wei Wuxian recalled an idea he had thought of when he was young and bored. There is a rule for every talisman formation in the world. If he could find the rule of the talisman to drive away evil spirits and change a few strokes, the effect of this talisman could be changed. Thinking about this, Wei Wuxian was not in a hurry to go down the mountain and began to scrutinize the lines of the talisman with interest. He looked at the curved lines on the talisman and pondered over them, and since he had no ink on hand, he bit his fingertip and used his blood as ink to make changes on the talisman paper. After scrapping several pieces of yellow paper, Wei Wuxian experimented many times and finally got some clues, and when he finally looked at it, The runic pattern looked like a human face smiling in a serene manner. Wei Wuxian saw that there were walking corpses surging around him, but they were rather scrupulously a few feet away from him, so Wei Wuxian stuck it on the trunk of the tree at his side, and then took a few steps away, only to see that the walking corpses were swarming towards that tree. It's done. A wry smile bloomed on his lips. Day 60 return. Wei Wuxian rushed and tried a few more painting methods, becoming more and more certain, and also finally left the mass grave. When he finally stepped on the normal land, the warm sunlight in the sky shone on him, which made him feel a little bit alive on earth. After walking for a while, Wei Wuxian searched for people and arrived at the town at the foot of the mass grave hill. Wei Wuxian looked back at the direction of the mass grave again, with an unknown meaning in his eyes. And then he turned Chenqing and traveled towards that town without looking back. Almost folded in this hellish place. So be it. Never come back. Hengi Town. Wei Wuxian's ragged and cloaked appearance at this time attracted the residents on the street to show their dislike, and no one was willing to approach him. However, when he walked into the small inn, the store assistant's slightly frightened look made Wei Wuxian realize abruptly that the people on the street did not just stay away because of his appearance. It was because he had not yet fully collected the deathly aura on his body. Guest. Is the guest staying at the tip or staying at the store? Staying in a store. Having not spoken to anyone for a long time, Wei Wuxian's voice was no longer clear, hoarse and hoarse. Wei Wuxian heard his own voice, pursed his lips slightly, no longer vocal. Only left some loose silver on the counter. Afraid that he would scare the shopkeeper again, he stopped making other movements. This shopkeeper and this store assistant are also considered to be people who have seen the world. Seeing him pay money nimbly, the running assistant is pushed forward by the boss, and cautiously takes Wei Wuxian to the ground 11th room. Do you want to take a bath? We have prepared hot water in the store, and you need to change your clothes. The store assistant was also smart, not too close to him, about a foot away. Looking at his appearance, also knew to ask more questions. Trouble for me to buy a ready-made clothes. Wei Wuxian paused for a moment, gave a few pieces of loose silver to that runner. Metaphysical color is enough, send it to my room, and the rest will be the honorarium for your help in running errands. Thank you, guest. Junior will take you to your room. Zhao happily took the silver from his hand, then retreated a zhang away, still somewhat not quite daring to approach Wei Wuxian. When he reached the door of the room, the junior hurriedly excused himself and withdrew. Soon there were other helpers who brought hot water. Those people did the same, not daring to speak more with him, and quickly left the room. Wei Wuxian touched his nose, thinking that he still needs to restrain this yin qi in time. After comfortably taking a hot bath and changing into clean clothes, Wei Wuxian felt that he had finally come to life, and the whole person was also angry. Casually put the Kenzio negative on his waist. Wei Wuxian stretched his waist, went downstairs and found a corner in the bustling lobby to sit down and eat. The store assistant also lost his previous fear and answered Wei Wuxian's questions attentively. Wei Wuxian counted the days in his mind. The mass grave, that place does not see the sun, the corpses are everywhere, and he is not like Lan Zon. Ohio timed the point to sleep so precisely, naturally cannot time. I did not expect that he had stayed in the mass grave for nearly 2 months. And now, those interesting news in the Zuanmen sect, also through the talk of the cultivators at the table just now, passed into his ears. A month or 2 ago, the Gusu Blue Clan, Lan Wangji Clan, Qinni Clan and the Yunmeng Jiang Clan in the middle of reconstruction. The 4 major cultivator clans announced that they were joining forces to rise up and attack the Qishan Wen Clan, calling it the March of the Shooting Sun. I have also heard that the inspector of Yiling has been transferred and replaced by a new owner who is oppressing the people and causing a lot of grievances. Wei Wuxian pondered. Since Dr. Wen was transferred to the battlefield, his brother naturally wouldn't stay. So there was nothing to avoid in Yiling, the monitoring squatter. Wei Wuxian lowered his head, his complexion cloudy, then poured down a mouthful of strong wine. However, there is no hurry yet. Day 61 people. Wei Wuxian was walking with his hands on his back, walking slowly on the street. He already looks handsome, extraordinary temperament. At this time the girls on the street cannot stop looking at him. He did not react, only listening to this side is the new baked buns yelling. Over there is the selling of arts and crafts vaudeville shouting, and bargaining for all kinds of voices. The noisy clamor of the bazaar all made him feel hard won, making him clearly feel the breath of life, with a bright smile on his face. Chen Fei was spinning recklessly in his fingertips, and he enjoyed this kind of anger. Wei Wuxian glanced at the location of the pharmacy, ready to take some injury medicine to go back, but was also lectured by the boss doctor, advising him not to look at his young base is good to make hard injuries, deficiency of qi and blood. Wei Wuxian had not heard this for a long time, felt a little trance nostalgia, even pacified the old man, carrying the medicine bag wandering. Lift up the corner of the coat to sit on the roadside wonton stall, Wei Wuxian said in a loud voice. Boss, come to a bowl of wontons. Put more chili. Okay, guest please sit down. It will come soon. The owner of the noodle stall is a middle-aged man with a simple and honest smile. Saying that, he fished out a strainer of wontons from the hot soup on the stove and put it into a bowl with good seasoning. Carrying the bowl and sending it to Wei Wuxian quickly, a bowl full of small wontons, thin skin wrapped with meat filling. Bright soup oil just soaked half of the wontons, on top of a few pie of vegetable leaves, green onion and garlic and shiny spicy seeds. The aroma of the broth was rich, causing Wei Wuxian's fingers to tingle. Boss uncle, please put in more chili. Even though he had just been criticized by the doctor, Wei Wuxian still did not like spicy food and did not abstain from eating it. Young man, my chili is very strong, you try it first. The boss smiled. Opened the stall for many years. He also has old customers who can eat spicy. But this young man looks at the face, one is not aware of the taste of his family spices, so put not too much. Wei Wuxian raised his eyebrows, pulled out a pair of chopsticks to mix the soup, picked up a bite. The meat filling is delicate, mixed with crispy lotus root, dipped in the delicious spicy soup. The crunchy lotus root aroma made Wei Wuxian suddenly think of the lotus root rib soup that his senior sister had made. Boss, what you made is so delicious, but can you give me some more chili? Wei Wuxian ate one and laughed. The boss was a bit surprised. Although the amount of spices was not much, most people would have some reaction, but the young man in front of him did not have a different color. Today is considered to have encountered the ability to eat spicy. Thinking like this, the boss had no worries and added another spoonful of chili to his bowl. This bowl of wontons with unusual spiciness made Wei Wuxian eat freely. And the boss looked at him with admiration and delight. After all, as a chef, being able to make people pleasurable because they ate the food they made was a very satisfying thing. When Wei Wuxian finished fixing a bowl of wontons, the meal time was approaching. The wonton stall was getting more and more people. Wei Wuxian put down the silver money and got up. Uncle, your wontons are really delicious. Thank you. At the end of the sentence, he turned around and disappeared into the sea of people. Young man, I haven't found your money yet. The boss, who was busy coming back to collect the money, looked at the silver taels on the dining table that far exceeded the selling price and stood on the street looking left and right. But Wei Wuxian had already disappeared. Alas, if this young man comes back again, then treat him to wontons again. The sun set in the west. The setting sun still had a touch of afterglow coloring the remnants of the sunset, and the dull blue sky was adorned with a few stars. Wei Wuxian smiled wordlessly and walked in the direction of the inn. Originally, he has never been far away from the human world. Originally, he is still the same Wei Wuxian. Day 63 burning. Midnight passed. Wei Wuxian opened his eyes, which were as dark as ink. He took the hat beside the bed and put it on his head, swept out of the inn without a sound, and went all the way to the Wen family's monitoring squatters. In the forest, there were still 5 miles away from that squatter's platform, and the outline of that squatter's platform could be vaguely glimpsed. Wei Wuxian stopped and blew a whistle. A few corpses and spirits came out and stood by his side. Wei Wuxian took out the newly drawn yin summoning talisman seals in his pocket and distributed them to them, and ordered them to stick the talisman seals on the monitoring squatter's platform. The ghosts and monsters sped forward. Wei Wuxian leisurely and slowly after them, walking with his hands behind his back, a faint smile on his pale face, but it was chilling. Between the mountains and fields, there were quite a few lonely graves and ghosts, and they were soon attracted by the yin summoning talisman to join the group as well. The 2 guards at the monitoring squatter's platform dozed off. One had already sat down to fall asleep, and the one standing had little spirit. They had no idea that the corpses and spirits in the mountain were coming towards them, and they had no idea that their death was imminent. A green ghost hen painted with red dandelion stroked the face of the standing guard, then reached into his mouth. Another ghost hand in the blink of an eye strangled the guard's neck. 10 fingers began to grow sharp nails. Embedded in the flesh of the guard's neck trachea, his vocal cords and throat by the growth of the ghost hand nails lived through. This was a female ghost with a strong grudge, and the guard was still alive, instantly catapulted awake by agonizing fear. But haunted by the spiteful ghost, he could not move or make a sound. His eyes were round, turned white and blood-filled, and his face was green and black. Half a moment later, the female ghost clawed his offspring root together with the pouch and cut it into several pieces, blood splattered. And the pain of this cone heart so that he finally broke his breath, the female ghost let go of his hand and threw his body on the ground ruthlessly. The sitting guard died a quick death. Still dreaming was a claw cleanly broken spine neck. The head was still being walked corpse to play with, skull cracked, white pulp coated the ground. Those eyes never opened again until death. When Wei Wuxian leisurely walked to the front of the monitoring squat, the Wen family cultivators in the squat had been abused and killed by most of the walking corpses and ghosts. And the squat was littered with corpses, limbs, and blood all over the ground. And the living Wen family cultivators hastily got up to cope with the situation, but they had no power to fight back. Wei Wuxian looked at the guards' corpses, a cold smile on his lips, then looked at the squatter's appearance, and did not go in. This woman is an unjust ghost in the vicinity of the monitoring squatters. Her grievances are so horrifying. It seems that these days after the transfer of warmth, these beasts must have done a lot of bastard things. The flute sound was melodious and secretive. The invoked corpse spirits put the talisman in place and then disappeared. The dead people who had fallen to the ground within the squatters began to rise crookedly from the ground and swept towards the terrified Wen clan. Cultivators, spirits, blood, mutilated limbs, and crushed flesh mixed together. The candlestick fell down, igniting the paper book, following the beams of the pavilion frame and blowing in the wind, quickly spreading and engulfing the entire squatter's platform. The living Wen family cultivators, by the dead Wen family cultivators, can only watch the flames along the blood and wine burned in front of the eyes, cannot escape, cannot break free, wailing all over the place, ringing in the sky. Wei Wuxian's side ear, eyes reflecting the blazing fire, but gradually turned into the lotus stalk appearance. Weird smile deepens. Fire-burning body is difficult to escape, can only be desperate to be tortured, waiting for death. The taste must not be good, right? He covered his eyes, and his laughter dispersed between heaven and earth along with the wailing. Crazy and desolate. Putting the bucket hat back on his head, he turned around to leave, when a fireman suddenly crawled out from the fire behind him, yelling for help. Wei Wuxian looked sideways. The fireman was quickly pulled back by a fiery hand, hissing as he was swallowed by the crackling waves of fire. Blood and smoke filled the sky, and the fishy air scattered in all directions. Wei Wuxian turned around with determination, his departing footsteps no longer stopping. The sudden wind and rain hit his bucket hat and stained the corners of his boots. This heavy rain extinguished the fire in the squatter's platform, and no one in the squatter's platform survived. 64th day words. Midday. Wei Wuxian settled in a corner of the inn's lobby. Did you hear about it? Last night when dogs inspection squatters in Yiling were burned down. Ho, of course, I even saw it. The flames lit up half the sky. Did you see the scene? I heard everyone died, not a single survivor. Yes, it's strange that after the fire burned down Wendigo's squatters, it rained heavily and extinguished the fire. The forest on the mountain didn't burn at all. It's simply God's eye. A table of cultivators were shouting warm dog. If the monitoring squatters here hadn't been burned down, how would this group of people dare to talk so loudly? However, thanks to the heavy rain, Wei Wuxian secretly thankful. Last night was really his ill-considered. In the future cannot act so recklessly. Well, at least first stay alive. Explore the news is not. But how to say is also considered the first step of revenge. Wei Wuxian, with a smile, raised the bowl of wine is about to drink. The table of cultivators began to talk about the news of the sun shooting expedition. Wei Wuxian stared to listen carefully. I would like to know who did it. Isn't that army of the sun shooting conquest not here yet? It's not the sun shooting march's army. I've heard that this matter was done by one person. Wei Wuxian's hand paused for a moment, then with his face as normal, he took a sip of wine and patiently listened down, although he knew that he would be exposed sooner or later. But right now the army of the sun shooting expedition was in the open, and with his special ability, it was more convenient for him to act in the dark. However, he had only made his first move yesterday, and that fire had burned many traces, so he thought that it was impossible for this group of people to know about his ability. However, he was afraid that some crooked and wild guesses would be spread out, but instead cause the attention of the warm dogs, so he would have to be more careful afterward. Wei Wuxian then tilted his ears to pay attention to that side. Ho, less bluffing. How is it possible? Who is so capable? Hey, don't believe it yet. It is said that when the crowd's appetite was lifted, that person drank a mouthful of wine and leisurely said, it is said that this warm dog is to burn, kill, loot, and pillage all kinds of evil, especially also good color. From time to time, women are killed by him. Not long ago there was a woman killed, but I did not expect that the father of this woman's son is a piece of iron plate, is actually a recluse for many years of the Taoist masters. Cultivation that is an unfathomable awe. The daughter was killed. The anger was unbearable. In a fit of anger, alone on the mountain, one person and one sword slaughtered the monitoring squatters of the warm dog. A fire burned away. At these words, Wei Wuxian put down his empty wine bowl and stopped caring about that side. Should have expected that this group of people who heard everything from hearsay couldn't say anything. Put down the chopsticks. Go back to the room to catch up on sleep. Day 65 Karma. After settling the account of the inn, thinking to take a good stroll around the bazaar before leaving, Wei Wuxian strolled around the town until sunset. The bazaar dispersed. Wei Wuxian played with the Chen Love in the sparse shadows of the street walking, not far from an old man with white hair, carrying a full of various colors of rope knots and flower spikes of the shelf hobbling forward. His heart moving, Wei Wuxian quickly stepped forward. Grandpa, let me help you. Saying this, Wei Wuxian pinned Kanzio back to his waist and reached out to hold the shelf. The old man panted heavily and looked at the handsome young man with a bright smile. He didn't look like some haphazard inferior, so he loosened his hand. Wei Wuxian took the shelf smoothly, and with his other hand helped the old man to walk forward. Thank you, lad. The old man's home is not far away, a lonely and unrelated craftsman. No need to thank you, old grandpa, it's just a show of hands. Wei Wuxian waved his hand. When people get old, they look at karma. You have helped me. I naturally want to thank you. Or else this little old man of mine will not be able to get over it in his heart. How about kid, you just look at this shelf? There is no you like? Just pick one. Counted as my thanks. The old man stroked his beard and made a sad face and said, this. Wei Wuxian made a mistake. Glanced at the old grandfather's shelf. There is a red thread spike hanging in the corner. Maybe because it looks rougher than the other spikes, so no one picks it. It looks like it's also some years old. But Wei Wuxian always felt that this spike is very suitable for the eyes. Since you said so, grandpa, then I'll be flattered. Let's go with this one. Wei Wuxian smiled and pointed at the red rope spike. The old man took a closer look at that spike and said somewhat blankly, huh? This is not expected after 20 years. It turns out that this spike can actually find a master. The old man and Wei Wuxian talked about the origin of the spike. He said that it turned out that this spike did not come from him, but 20 years ago a Kun Dao who came to help them solve the walking corpse learned the preparation technique from him for a few days and became. Therefore, it does not look fine. The young Kun Dao originally also wanted to take away to give people as a gift, but before leaving the spike but suddenly cannot find. Kun Dao released a smile, waved the dust, said no harm anyway. She would have woven, and then said to him, if the old man later saw the spike, can be on her behalf for this spike to find a master. After Kun Dao left, the old man realized that this spike is actually tied to his rope cob rack, but for 20 years no one has ever paid attention to it. The old man believes in karma, so he believes that this spike must be waiting for its owner, so it has stayed for so long. It is also considered to have fulfilled a wish of mine. The word karma is really mysterious. The old man sighed and handed the red spike to Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian looked at the red spike and was also slightly stunned. Fate? Wei Wuxian tied the red spike to Kanzio, rejoiced in his heart, and said goodbye to the old man. At the twilight of the setting sun, Wei Wuxian stood at the mouth of the diverging official road, pondered for a moment, and headed towards Kishan. Volume 4 Bloodshed in Laude, 71st to 92nd day. 71st First place. This man died in an extremely gruesome state. His eyes were hideous and dead. He was nailed to the wall in a cross-like misery, the abdomen of his middle finger to the surface of his palm, his wrist, his arm, his shoulder blades, and his chest, an uninterrupted trail of blood connecting his right and left middle fingers, deep enough to be seen in the bone. Similarly, from the spirit of the sky, the center of the eyebrow, the bridge of the nose, the middle of the lips, the throat, until the lower third. The two bone-deep blood marks intersected the lower concave chest, the heart nowhere to be seen. The blood was still soaking outwards. This body was wearing the Kishan Wen Clan's yang-patterned robe. And when he fell alone and still oppressed others, he happened to be bumped into by Wei Wuxian. So he was thrown to this Wen Clan's inspection squatters. These squatters are not to many people. See the horror of this person's death. Squatters in the crowd are furious. Everyone from the danger, squatters outside the sticker all over the yin symbols. And the body is no one dares to go to collect the body for it. In the end, an old man who was forced to come in to do the work saw his pity and pushed the body to the outside of the squatter's platform to bury it. Wei Wuxian wore a hat and was heading towards the squatter's platform, when the old man saw that he was not wearing a yang pattern robe, but only a Zuan clothes, and he dared to walk towards the mountain. He warned him, "Old woman, are you working as a laborer in that squatter's platform?" Wei Wuxian asked her in a lowered voice line, without removing his bucket hat. "Alas, it's just my turn to do labor today," the old man sighed. "Oh, what does this mean?" The old woman then informed Wei Wuxian about the small villagers under their mountain being coerced by the squatters to do white labor for Them and the village had no choice but to take turns with one family per day to go up the mountain. Midnight. Wei Wuxian's blood-stained fingertips sketched a few strokes on each of the exorcism talisman seals, then drifted away, sounding a leisurely whistle but like a hypnotic musical tune. A bunch of walking corpses and yin spirits were invited into the blood-colored banquet. Wei Wuxian reclined on the tree. The flute sounded melodiously and the banquet opened. The Wen Clan cultivator was ruthlessly kneaded into a ball by two walking corpses. His arms, legs, waist, abdomen and spine were twisted into a twisted position that had no possibility of survival. And some of the broken bone spurs in his body pierced out of his flesh, turning this body into a ball of flesh and blood. However, this ball's vicious face was still floating on the surface, and it was thrown around by several walking corpses casually. Corpse ball smashed into another Wen family cultivator, knocked him into the pond. His head was knocked out a bloody hole by a sharp stone. Compared to the blood ball, this is still considered an easy death. Sounding miserable, the song ended. Wei Wuxian jumped down from the tree and slowly stepped into this inspection squat. The two corpses wearing yang-patterned robes roughly grabbed the squatter owner in front of Wei Wuxian, thinking that they had suffered a lot of anger from the squatter owner. The squatter looked at the black-robed man wearing a bucket hat in front of him, shrouded by the shadow of death, terrified, not daring to utter a single breath. Wei Wuxian snorted, "Sign of the shooting sun. Tell me what you know, all of it." Great warrior. I don't know." Since you don't know, you're not much use. I say. After gathering the many pieces of information, Wei Wuxian finally asked, "Where's Wen Chao?" This little one really doesn't know. Maybe in Kishan." Wei Wuxian originally didn't want to ask anything famous. Left and right these Wen dogs would be killed by him. Asking this sentence was just a passing remark. Immediately afterward, a walking corpse directly broke the neck spine of the squatter's table master, but it was a dry death. "You guys tear up that talisman and dig a pit to bury yourselves," Wei Wuxian ordered, burying himself in the doorway, not to be taken out of the ground, and waiting for a spiritual attraction from the Zuan sect to come out again. He thought that it would be resolved. The villagers at the bottom of the mountain hadn't seen anyone for a few consecutive days, and no one had come to oppress them, so they thought that they wouldn't come back after that. Thinking about this, Wei Wuxian did not go down the mountain, but went directly to another mountain. 79th day, second location. After entrusting a little girl to pass on some specific information about the sun shooting expedition to a group of seemingly reliable cultivators, Wei Wuxian traveled to the monitoring Liao and casually climbed up a tree to fall asleep. When he was young and naughty, he basically climbed all the trees in Lotus Dock, especially after a trip to the mass grave. He now likes to nestle in the trees. The setting sun is intoxicated, the afterglow is swallowed inch by the teeth of the mountain. The moon is out of the east mountain. The stars are scattered in the dark purple canopy. Wei Wuxian woke up from the tree. His eyesight looked at the brightly lit supervisory squatter's platform, under the bucket hat. The gentle smile on his lips abruptly became grim. He jumped down from the trunk of the tree and approached the squatter's platform. One of the yin-avoiding talisman seals was reversed as he wandered around, and when he followed the wall, there was an old servant of the Wen clan and a young woman at the back door of the squatter's platform. Wei Wuxian dodged and swept into the shadows of the forest, his hand covering his waist. Kanzio on guard. "Girl, you should quickly leave along this path. Halfway up the mountainside there is an old hunter's house. You go and hide in that cellar for the night. I'll drag them for you." This old servant's face was a bit anxious. Thank you, old uncle." The young girl's eyes were flooded with tears, obviously frightened. After thanking that old servant, the girl trotted and disappeared among the forest shade. "Sins." The old servant sighed and retreated back inside the door, locking it. Wei Wuxian silently let go of the door, gently blew a whistle, recruited a little ghost to protect the escaped girl, and then looked at the door in a daze. After a long time of not seeing any other movement, Wei Wuxian climbed over the wall and disappeared into the inspection squat. "Dog slave." The squatter master cursed at this old servant who let the girl go, and even picked up a whip. So a long fine iron whip with extraordinary power that it didn't need much strength to whip someone to the point of splitting their flesh. Wei Wuxian blew a sharp whistle. A little ghostly child with miserable white skin drilled out from the ground, viciously biting that squatter stage master's hand that was about to do evil, not letting go of his mouth. The squatter owner was unguarded and screamed miserably. The whip flew away from his hand before it could hurt the old servant. The ghost boy still did not let go, until a bone-tearing sound. The ghost boy directly bit off two of his fingers, backed up a distance, holding the broken fingers sit down in place, while staring viciously at the squatter master, while slowly chewing on the fingers. The squatter stage master clasped his hands and screamed miserably, while the skinny old servant trembled on the ground and cried, "Retribution. It's all retribution." The Chenqing cuckoo moves. Grievous female ghosts covered in bloody skeletons peeled away from the ground and burrowed out, surrounding the squatter lord, their sharp-boned fingers carving into his arms, scratching out blood marks and death, his skin infected with necrophilic grievances into grayish-purple bloodstains. These grudging ghosts were surprisingly all the killing sins created by the squatter stage master in front of him, who took pleasure in torturing people, and the grievances were overwhelming. Most of them were bruised young women, and there was no lack of some frail old man's corpses. The surrounding yin qi was thick and filled with yin spirit walking corpses surface, offering their favors and good behavior around Wei Wuxian. Go, giving an order to the spiteful ghosts, he urged them to take revenge. Wei Wuxian turned around and helped the old servant up, who subconsciously avoided his hand. Old uncle trusted me? Wei Wuxian clenched his fist and said, "If you trust me, take those who haven't done any great evil in the squatter's platform along with you." "You, which immortal are you?" Seeing that Wei Wuxian was not malicious, the old servant, though scared, boldly spoke to him. "I'm Yiling. I'm from Yiling. My division is nameless and not worthy of mention." The old servant shook his head and sighed. "I have long known that they will be retributed. Here there are still some people from our same village. All of them were blackmailed to come here. And take them away." "Old uncle, after leaving, go far away and don't come back." Yes. The old servant trembled and left, taking those ordinary people away from the squatter's platform. At this time, the squatter terrace lord had already been avenged by a group of female ghosts for many hours, hissing at the top of his voice. His face was all covered in blood and flesh. His eyeballs wanted to fall out, his ears were torn, his nose was chipped, the fingers of his hands were gnawed by the little ghosts, his waist and spine, his legs and feet, his bones were shattered, bending them into a curvature that a commoner couldn't do. "Stop!" The female ghosts were stopped by Wei Wuxian when she wanted to cut off his tongue directly. The female ghosts were quite resentful and glared at the squatter master with death, but they also obeyed Wei Wuxian's order to stop and wait on the sidelines. Wei Wuxian spun the Chenqing in his hand, the red rope tassel swaying, the corners of his lips under the bucket hat glowing with an eerie smile. "Want to die?" Under the shadowy aura rendering, a compelling sound and color resounded. "Shoot the sun's expedition, the Wen family's news, tell the truth. Otherwise, hey." A light laugh, but let the squatter master face fear, and then the words, even more let him despair. "Hey, let the girls play with you enough. I will make you into a walking corpse and give it to them to play slowly." No one could see the blood color that surfaced in Wei Wuxian's eyes under the bucket hat. "If there is a false report, let the girls just tear you apart." Wei Wuxian memorized an entry, then resumed smiling and asked him, "Wen Chao. Where is he?" "Young Master Wen Chao." With a crunch, the female ghost crushed another piece of his humerus under Wei Wuxian's smile. He passed by a few days ago, heading to Kishan." "Very well." Wei Wuxian's eyes were cold and reddish black, and the excitement on his face widened. "Suit yourselves." He turned around to get out, and the female ghosts swarmed around him, directly breaking him into a meatball. Wei Wuxian opened the door and sidestepped to make way for this meatball to be thrown out by the female corpses, smashing a warm dog that would choke on its breath, and then both mutilated corpses were torn apart, mixing with the garden full of broken meat and limbs. "Disperse them all." After dispersing the spiteful ghosts, Wei Wuxian was about to leave, but he saw that little ghost child looking straight at him and refusing to leave. Wei Wuxian frowned slightly. This little guy in front of him had a lot of grievances. If he let it go, he was afraid that it would lead to a crime. The little ghost child pulled him by the corner of his coat and pointed to a direction. Wei Wuxian thought for a moment and followed his guidance. The ghost boy led Wei Wuxian to a mountain forest not far away, and then began to plow the soil. Wei Wuxian realized that the place was quite heavy with grievances and whistled suspiciously. A red-clothed female ghost with a green face came out from the ground, and she lifted up the little ghost child, who babbled and waved at her, looking very happy. But this woman does not look like the ghost child's real mother. It seems that she was also victimized by the warm dog. Wei Wuxian mutely guessed. The grievances of those women in the monitoring squat have been mostly consumed, and the spirit body will soon disappear, while this big and little one's grievances have not yet been released, so he can't just leave it alone. Considering a lot, Wei Wuxian recruited this big and small one to put it in the spirit bag, and went north all the way. Day 86, Branch 3. In the heat of summer, a young master came to this Wen family inspection Liao, so the cultivators could only use their spiritual power to maintain the cold ice and make an ice cellar. A cultivator ran here to cool off. quietly slipped into the ice cellar. But the door of this ice cellar abruptly closed. That cultivator was about to shout. His mouth and nose were covered by a pair of thin and bony green hands. He stared wide-eyed. And then he was dragged by the resentful spirits into these cohesive ice cubes in the ice cellar. Body temperature temporarily melted some of the ice-cold water from his 7 orifices to soak in. This cultivator had not yet slowed down. His expression was horrified and hideous. The ice sustained by the spiritual energy only melted a little. And when it met with the spiritual key in his meridians, it began to refreeze. This person's body temperature dropped rapidly. And even the blood in his body had ice slag flowing around, damaging his tendons and internal organs in a big way. This cultivator finally reacted and started to activate his spiritual energy, but unfortunately, it was too late. He didn't know that his tendons and veins were broken because he was numb from freezing. There is no path to guide the spiritual power. Spiritual power in the body rampage, so that there is no thawing of the blood thorns directly into the internal organs, flesh and bone spine. He was urged by his own spiritual power live stabbed to death. Ride the cool naturally there also in the shade under the corner tree. In this cultivator cozy lazy, a hemp rope directly dead wrapped around his neck, hanging him on the thick branches. Wide eyes and spit out the tongue was plucked out by the female ghost, casually thrown on the ground. A young beast was flopping around in the pool. A cultivator was on the sidelines with a whip. The whip was flung and slipped out of his hand unexpectedly. The cultivator drank the yellow soup and went into the water with a curse. Unexpectedly, as soon as he got out of the water, he was pulled by the long hair in the water, and a large amount of water gushed into his mouth and nose. The female ghost didn't give him a chance to struggle upward. Her hair stuck into his bloodshot and rounded eyeballs, trapping his hands, and her sharp nails scratched his face, blocking his intention to use his spiritual power until the man drowned before letting go of her hand and hiding. A patrolling cultivator passed by and saw this corpse, wanted to go into the water to fish it up, naturally. He was also dragged into the pond by the female ghost with his hair and drowned, and at this time, a large number of walking corpses also finally attacked the squatter's platform. A cultivator cut off the head of a zombie. The purple and black blood instantly splashed all over his face, a part of it even poured into his throat. This zombie was originally poisoned to death, and the blood of the zombie also contained the deadly poison that killed him. Coupled with the zombie poison, this cultivator was poisoned to death in an instant. With the sound of the flute urging for his life, Wei Wuxian slowly stepped in. The group of walking corpses instantly rioted. A group of walking corpses pounced on a cultivator. Grasping and biting fiercely, the person's flesh was torn off piece by piece alive. The scream could be described as sharp and miserable. Blood splattered half a foot. Wei Wuxian also had a means. Yin gas into the cultivator's body. He will be crazy mobilized aura to expel it. But yin gas and the intentional manipulation flow very fast, such as maggots drilling into the bones and sinews, the aura and its collision. The direct bones and sinews inch by inch shattered, since it cannot be lived. No skeleton support of the body as a puddle of slime on the ground softly. Some people wail endlessly, some people running around. Big evil people carry a burst of blood. Yin gas is surrounded by corpses and ghosts of the first choice, naturally cannot escape. And those who are not very big evil people, Wei Wuxian is also considered to turn a blind eye. Further, volume for cat and mouse. Day 93 Day 100. Day 93 The first penalty. Wei Wuxian blew Chenqing to step into this pavilion. The next grudge had to be resolved by him personally. At this moment, Wen Chao was holding onto an already altered yin avoiding talisman seal, hiding in the corner of the pavilion room and shivering, with his lower body bloody. The mournful wailing outside was incessant, and the flute sound was like a hypnotic talisman piercing into his ears, evoking the most horrifying impression in his heart. The sound of the flute is getting closer and closer, accompanied by the sound of foot boots on the wooden pavilion corridor board. This footsteps did not make a big noise, nor deliberately convergence, as if walking leisurely, but led a person fear to the extreme. Creak, cackle, step by step, mixed with this inexplicably weird rhythmic flute sound, pressed against Wen Chao's nerves. Close, close. Closer and closer, and then, it came to an abrupt end. Wen Chao covered his ears and eyes, his body trembled. Not daring to see or hear in the slightest, in the middle of the day, he opened his eyes slightly by a slit, and Zuanmo's foot boots were reflected in his eyes. He looked upward along those legs, although that person was wearing a bucket hat, but the perspective of looking up could still see Wei Wuxian's pale and gloomy face under the hanging veil. Wei Wuxian looked down at his terrified expression, a snicker spreading across his lips as if he was looking at a damned prey, and his intimidation was chilling. But I have said that even if I turn into a ferocious and evil ghost and haunt you day and night, I will let you not. Get well, die. Wei Wuxian's body began to coalesce with yin qi around him, and his eyes were murderous. The red-clothed female ghost burrowed out from the floor, and her hands tightly pinched Wen Chao's chin and throat, making it impossible for him to vocalize for help. The little ghost child turned to Wen Chao without hesitation, gnawing off the thumb of his left hand. Regardless of the wailing outside, Wei Wuxian struck an extreme yin breath into his dantian. This yin breath could not only make him sing at night and have good dreams, but also enable him to be clearly detected by Wei Wuxian within 10 miles. Several yin spirits came to report. Wei Wuxian listened to the ghosts and raised his eyebrows. Apart from the Wen family, there were several other immortal forces coming here at a fast pace. Wei Wuxian didn't know whether these parties were enemies or friends, but at this time, it was better for him not to show his face in front of both parties. Wei Wuxian glanced at Wen Chao with a cold smile and stepped out of the inner room, concealing his tracks as Chenqing ordered the ghosts to retreat. You wait. Under the effect of the yin breath, Wen Chao looked more and more terrified. You wait. You wait. Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian had obviously been thrown into the mass grave. How could he come out alive? He really turned into an evil ghost. Wei Wuxian turned into an evil spirit came to him to claim his life. He would not let himself go. Wen Liu. Wen Chao bursts out with a heart-rending howl. His lower body is disgusting, and at this moment, the Dan hands, Wen Liu, finally arrives late, rushes before the arrival of those forces, and takes away Wen Chao, who has been scared into insanity. Wei Wuxian, who knew that it was not advisable to stay here for a long time, also quickly chased after Wen Chao. Dan transforming hand? Wei Wuxian snorted. He didn't know whether this Dan transformation hand, which had transformed millions of spiritual power gold Dans, could still transform this yin Dans in his abdomen this time. What he didn't know was that the cultivators coming here were the Gusu Lan Clan and the Yunmeng Jiang Clan. 96th day second penalty. In the long corridor of the secret room, Wei Wuxian walked with his hands on his back. At the end of the corridor was the brightly lit inner room with candles. An oil lamp was placed on the corridor wall every 3 steps, so the surrounding scenery was clearly visible. He stepped into the inner room. Wen Chao had not yet woken up. Wei Wuxian smiled eerily and whistled softly. A thick yin qi tumbled and enveloped Wen Chao's whole body. Wen Chao was in a black mist, and all around him, corpse spirits of all shapes and sizes approached him. His own cultivation was unrefined, and he didn't even have a weapon in the illusionary realm, so at this moment, he could only howl shrilly for Wen Liu to come to his rescue, and then keep running for his life. His feet were dark, accompanied by sparse rustling sounds. The place he stepped over made a numbing sound. He looked down and saw that what he stepped on was not land at all, but dense necrophagous insects. Densely packed corpse worms were crawling up his boots, no matter how fast he ran. There were always a large number of corpse worms climbing and biting on his legs. Wen Chao's howl was shrill. He opened his eyes and was awakened, as if he were a magic barrier, unable to see Wei Wuxian next to him. Nor could he see the female ghost or the ghost child. He pulled up his pants leg, as if he had seen something extremely scary and dirty, and kept rubbing his hand downward. The whistling sound did not stop. Wen Chao finally realized that there was an invisible evil ghost driving a swarm of corpse worms, and no matter what he did, these corpse worms kept coming. Wen Chao finally couldn't stand it any longer and pulled out a dagger from under his pillow, which was a sharp weapon with a cold sheath. However, Wen Chao used this dagger to start scraping down his own leg flesh ruthlessly. That piece and strand of blood-red flesh fell on the couch. As if he couldn't feel any pain, he kept scraping down his leg flesh, letting this mattress and quilt be streamed with blood. Roll down. Get out. Wen Chao yelled. At this time in his perspective, the corpse worms were finally eliminated completely, and his leg, at this time, only a few strands of bright red flesh hanging above the white bones. The bed was full of blood and scraped down meat, and at this time, his sanity was considered to be truly awake. Not waiting for him to scream out, the female ghost had already quickly grabbed his chin, and the little ghost child took the opportunity to crawl over to Wen Chao's left hand to gnaw on it. Wen Chao finally saw Wei Wuxian, the Wei Wuxian who had taken off his bucket hat. The candlelight was flickering. Wei Wuxian's handsome face was set off by the flickering candlelight and made him strangely pale. Wen Chao's face showed horror, while the female ghost did not allow him to scream out, pinching his chin and stuffing his own leg meat into his mouth in a smooth manner. The flute sounded at first. Yin breath quickly mesmerized Wen Chao's divine sense. Eat, eat, eat. Wen Chao actually laughed. With a broken palm, eagerly cupped up the bed himself cut off and scattered meat skin stuffed into his mouth, the female ghost let go of him. The little ghost child has bitten down 2 of his fingers, as usual, chewing and gnawing on the sidelines. Eat. Wen Chao leg blood dripping, and his own left hand only to fingers left, holding the bloody raw meat constantly stuffed into the mouth. Full of faces also red, as if a hungry ogre, except that the meat he ate with relish is his own. For a while, this chamber. Only this creepy chewing sound accompanied by weird tunes of the flute. When the flute sound stopped at first, there was a sudden silence in the secret room, and a voice suddenly sounded in Wen Chao's still unconscious mind. Is it delicious? Wei Wuxian smiled morosely, the scene in front of him not making him feel half uncomfortable. After losing control of his flute, Wen Chao was jolted back to his senses by Wei Wuxian's voice. He woke up as if from a dream and looked at the half-chewed piece of meat in his hand in horror. Wen Chao quickly threw out the piece of meat in his hand and was busy trying to vomit out all the leg meat he had already eaten. But he could not vomit out anything except saliva mixed with blood, and even when he tried to put his hand into his throat to dig, he was still unsuccessful. The female ghost wanted to go forward to stop him, but was stopped by Wei Wuxian wordlessly. He smiled and moved his steps, slowly approaching Wen Chao, looking down at him, his voice as cold as a stern ghost demanding his life. The meat you cut off yourself, is it delicious? Wen Chao was scared out of his wits and screamed at the top of his lungs. Wei Wuxian. So what if you are a ghost? Have my Wen family exterminated fewer evil ghosts? Wen Chao tried to stand up, but under the extreme fright he forgot that his legs had been cut off, and those two bones had become ornamental. Not enough to support him to stand at all, and he fell to the ground at once. Frightened, Wen Chao hastily used those half-crippled, blood-covered hands to support himself on the ground to crawl backward, trying to get away from Wei Wuxian, his stumpy legs dragging out a trail of blood. Wei Wuxian was just about to lift Chenqing. His complexion changed slightly. The killing intent vaguely surfaced in his eyes again. He stopped and inclined his head to look at the long corridor. What a good dog! Wei Wuxian cursed in a stern voice. Wei Wuxian raised his hand to put on the bucket hat, and the two ghosts hid their traces as he gripped Chenqing tightly and continued to whistle sharply towards the mouth of the chamber. And at that moment, Wen Chao, once again under control, picked up his dagger and viciously picked off his hamstring. At the other end, the one who arrived was Wen's Huan-den hands, Wen Yuliu, and when the blood breath in the corridor entered his nostrils, Wen Yuliu had already decided that the Zuin's shadow was a foe and not a friend. He didn't guess the identity of the outsider, and utilized his gong fu to attack the other party's Danshan with a palm strike. The first time I saw him, I was in the middle of a fight, and he was in the middle of a fight. When Wen Yuliu saw the other party wearing a bucket hat and turned around without any intention to dodge, he was a bit alarmed. All immortal cultivators know that his technique Dan Hands is outstanding. However, this person seems to not care about his divine technique at all. Furthermore, even if he didn't know him, someone attacking the Danshan couldn't be this arrogant. If this person's cultivation was not too strong, then he had some kind of backstroke. Wen Yuliu was on his guard and wanted to try him out first. However, the fact is that Wei Wuxian does not need to avoid. Not to mention that at this time his body at this moment is also difficult to avoid this strike. Can only secretly transport the Yin Dan condense Yin Qi ready to hard resistance. The big deal is that he ate this move. Wen Yuliu do not want to be good. The two phases exchanged hands. Wei Wuxian was knocked back against the wall. His bucket hat fell to the ground. He held onto the wall and swallowed the blood that surged to his throat. Staring dead on in the direction of Wen Yuliu and Wen Chao, the corner of his mouth cracked open with a fierce look. Wen Yuliu had already broken into the inner room. Seeing Wen Chao's appearance at this moment was also chilling, but his years of caution still prompted him to quickly calm down, protecting Wen Chao's body in front of him, defending Wei Wuxian. Yinqi, he rubbed his hand thinking about how in recent days, the Wen family's inspection squatters had been bloodied by walking corpses one after another, but he could not find a reason for it. Wen Yuliu looked up at Wei Wuxian, suspicion in his eyes. Whose cultivator dared to practice this kind of evil art? What's more, the other party's spiritual power is so low, is the talent low, cultivation is not refined and therefore on the external path. But this body of strange skills and tricks. After taking a closer look at Wei Wuxian, Wen Yuliu was suddenly shocked to realize this person's identity. Cloud Dream first disciple, Wei Wuxian. Wen Yuliu did not dare to determine. He originally did not have much dealings with him, not to mention that person is a great disciple of Cloud Dream, talented. How could he use this kind of unusual tricks? The technique of transforming Dan Hand can only transform the spiritual power of other cultivators. But Wei Wuxian's Danshan at this time is absorbing most of the Yin Qi of the mass graves. It is a Yin Dan that has not been cultivated and directly relies on the brute force to coalesce, even if it is Wen Yuliu. He also has no other way to deal with it. The Lotus Dock battle that day. Was he transformed? Dan should be Jiang's heir Jiang Evening Yin rather than Cloud Dream first disciple Wei Wuxian, that after grabbing Wei Wuxian, that palm he felt the other side of the spiritual power micro-audible. And in recent days, Jiang's heir is still making a big fuss about rebuilding Cloud Dream and recruiting disciples to join the alliance of the four great families. It was actually so. In a flash of lightning, Wen Yuliu wore up the trick of it, and actually guessed about 8 points. Looking at Wei Wuxian's gaze gradually changing, observing his disorganized aura, with a thought, he no longer made a move to confront it, and instead took advantage of this time to bring Wen Chao to run away quickly and leave this place. The Yin spirit's ghost language informed Wei Wuxian that several more cultivators quickly rushed to this side. Wei Wuxian calmed the killing intent in his eyes, and after quickly dispersing the Yin spirit that he had recruited, he dragged his injured body to the Wen family's stables to casually ride away and continue to chase after Wen Chao. The immortal cultivators who chased after him were naturally Zhang Cheng and Lan Forgetting Ji. Zhang Cheng had inquired about Wei Wuxian for a long time without any result, and when he heard about Wen Chao halfway, he realized that he had been running towards Qishan Mountain, and his monstrous hatred made him go to the right route. So he turned his head to lead the people to chase after Wen Chao first. Blue Forgetting Machine followed all the way, always asking him if there is any news of Wei Wuxian, although Zhang Cheng did not understand what he wanted to do, but just guessed that before these two people together to slaughter Zuanwu, but also counted the life of a friend, and ask a couple of questions is normal. I don't care about him anyway. The four families alliance are going to kill the warm dog. Just as Wei Wuxian does not know who is coming, Blue Forgetting Machine and Zhang Cheng also do not know who is going. It is just that the old people will eventually meet again. 99th day, third penalty. Wen Chao's injuries were too severe and always tripped up when Yiliu's footsteps, so Wei Wuxian was always able to catch up with them when they stopped for a break, and would also incidentally destroy the Wen's inspection squatters where they had landed. Wen Yuliu quickly realized this. After practicing the Dan hands to its fullest extent, it has always been others hiding from him. But now it is he who is being chased by others and has no strategy to deal with it. After several inspector squatters were destroyed in a row, Wen Yuliu stopped bringing Wen Chao to the inspector squatters. Wei Wuxian, with his heavenly ability to attract ghosts, could easily solve a whole squatter's platform when he met the monitoring squatters just by crossing the road. Wen Yuliu knew very well that if Wei Wuxian wanted to exterminate the two of them right now, it would only be as easy as a slap in the face. But he had not done so yet, only to relieve his hatred and tease them. However, the most embarrassing thing for him was that they could only watch themselves being fooled by him. Other than that, there was nothing they could do. They couldn't escape, they couldn't hide. Wei Wuxian could recruit ghosts and he could kill them. But with Wei Wuxian's speed of recruiting ghosts, he was definitely the one who exhausted himself first. Besides, it was impossible for him to get close to Wei Wuxian these days, and on balance, he could only bring Wen Chao to be chased and killed by Wei Wuxian. If Wei Wuxian wants to deal with Wen Chao, he only needs to blow his Kanzayo not far away, and Wen Chao will go crazy and mutilate himself. After many probes, Wen Yuliu realizes that there is a yin key that has been integrated into Wen Chao's aura, and if he has to forcefully remove it, Wen Chao will be demented if he doesn't die. Moreover, Wen Yuliu guesses that this yin key may still have the ability to track. Wen Yuliu decided to run back with Wen Chao. Every time Wei Wuxian catches up with them, Wen Chao loses a finger and has a few more bloody holes in his body. At this time, Wen Chao had lost 8 of his 10 fingers, and only 2 fingers remained on his right hand. Inside the hidden cave, Wen Yuliu carefully hides the traces of the cave entrance, and after placing Wen Chao in a good position, he casts a talisman and collects firewood to build a bonfire in the cave. Wen Chao has already been tortured by the nightmare to the point that even the sound of sparks exploding can make him cower in fear. Wen Yuliu takes out food and passes it to Wen Chao, and then gives him medicine. Wen Chao has not dared to eat meat since he ate his own leg, and all Wen Yuliu gives him is dry food. There is a stream about 10 feet away from the cave, so Wen Yuliu leaves the cave to get water. However, at this moment, the sound of the flute that urges for life and sobs the soul takes the opportunity to sound again. Wen Yuliu quickly puts away his water bag, and he still hears Wen Chao's shrill screams of misery before he swept into the cave. Wen Chao himself put his head alive in the fire, his hair quickly burned, his whole head was wrapped in flames. Wen Yuliu brought him to the stream to extinguish the fire, but Wen Chao's head had already turned out blood and flesh due to the burns. Hideous and gruesome. 50 feet away, Wei Wuxian had by now changed into clean black clothes, blending in with this night color. He was lying comfortably on a tree trunk, his slender hand holding the Kenzayo, as if the tune just now was just a leisurely pastime. Not a murderous demonic sound. This flute didn't sound for too long before it was interrupted by a sharp wail and leisurely ceased. And a hint of satisfaction flooded Wei Wuxian's cold eyes. Turning over and leaping, sitting steadily on the horse's back, Wei Wuxian drove the horse to continue chasing towards Wen Yuliu and the two of them. Day 100 revisited. A post not far from Qishan, 10 miles to the south. Wei Wuxian sensed where Wen Chao was, rolled over and dismounted, released the horse, and then leaned towards that side step by step. He did not recruit any other yin spirits. This place was already not far away from Qishan, and the game that he was already almost tired of playing could end. Stagecoach station. Zhang Cheng and Blue Forgetting Machine tracked down the trail for a long time, and finally found traces of Wen Jiliu near a remote post station in the deep mountains. Fearing Wen Jiliu's move of transforming Dan Hand, the two of them lurked on the roof, observing the interior of the house through the cracks of the tiles. Wen Chao's ghastly appearance and tragic death made the two of them startled, and the he in his mouth that he seemed to be extremely afraid of also made the two of them even more suspicious in their hearts. And their vigilance rose, until Wen Yuliu stood up suddenly and looked straight to the quarter. Wei Wuxian only brought the ghosts with him. The female ghost drilled into them first and opened the door of the stage. Wei Wuxian nodded at her to show his thanks, stepped into the stage and walked to the staircase. Wen Chao's two bare palms covered his ears and eyes with deathly fear, and Wen Yiliu's face was stony and unbearable. The rooftop duo were also scornful, placing their hands at the hilts of their swords at their waists. Foot boots stepped on the wooden boards, step by step, not slow. Wei Wuxian smiled, his eyes glowing with morose coldness, walking with his hands on his back as if he were taking a stroll. Oppressing Wen Chao and Wen Yiliu's state of mind, he stood at the stairway, then turned around. On the roof, Lan Wangji saw that bright and handsome face. His eyes widened incredulously, his lips trembled, and he wordlessly pronounced a few words. Zhang Qing stood up almost on the spot. It was Wei Wuxian. Extra volume. The past flows by. I don't know how long I've been dreaming. You must know where the flute song came from in March. Blue Forgetting Machine was walking alone in the mist. He knew that this should be a dream world, but there was no Wei Wuxian's figure on his side. The scene around him suddenly changed. In the dark cave, in front of the runic fire flickering, there are a few silhouettes on the cave wall. He walked briskly to that place, and the scene in front of him caused his heart to tighten violently. Surprisingly, it was the worried-faced Wen King and Wen Ning, and the two people lying down were the unconscious Zhang Cheng, as well as the weak Wei Wuxian. Lan Wangji suddenly realized what scene was in front of him. He sprinted to Wei Wuxian's side, wanting to help him up, but no matter how he probed, his hand could never touch his body. At the same time, none of the phantoms present could see Lan Wangji. In this dream of past memories, Lan Wangji was just a spectator, unable to stop, unable to participate. Even if he knows it's futile, he still sits beside Wei Wuxian. Even if he can't touch his body at all, he still tries to gently caress his cheeks and the bleeding wounds on his belly. Even if it's clear that he can't hear him at all, he still stubbornly calls out his name over and over again. Wei Ying. Wei Wuxian snapped his eyes open. There was some unexpected situation. Your Jindan is still inside you. Wen frowned as she looked at Wei Wuxian and said. Wei Wuxian couldn't move and could only look at her in confusion. Warmth pursed her lips and said with a grave expression. Wei Wuxian, I must remind you of one thing. What? Blue Forgetting Machine lowered his head and saw him inquiring with a gaze gesture, then snapped his head up to look at Wenqi. Even though he already had a warning in his heart, it was still hard to accept when he heard it with his own ears. 3 words brought, is how many years he endured the pain. Wen King pursed her lips and said with a grave expression. Wei Wuxian, I must remind you of one thing. What is it? Wei Wuxian was a little anxious, puzzled as to why Wen'er would suddenly say such out of the blue words at this moment. When dissecting and exchanging the Jindan master, Wen'er was always a little reluctant to say the latter. What? Wei Wuxian looked anxious. One must remain absolutely awake to guide the Jindan and the aura, otherwise, the Jindan may become unstable and dissipate after removal. Wei Wuxian sniffed in a bit of a trance, and Blue Forgetting Machine saw that all expressions on his face were slowly collected, very calm, so calm that it was heart-stopping. Blue Forgetting Machine, still caressing his face, softly shouted, Wei Ying. His Wei Ying couldn't hear or touch. In the middle of the day, Wei Wuxian regained his mobility, and Blue Forgetting Machine made a move to help him. But when Ning crossed him to hold Wei Wuxian, he saw Wei Wuxian nod slightly. I thought I couldn't do it, but it turns out that I just have to be awake. So what's the big deal? Come on. Wen Ning saw this and helped him to half sit up. Wei Wuxian had a knife mark at the small of his back, still bleeding. Wen Ning couldn't bear to incline his head, Lan Zhan's hand trembled slightly as he looked at what was in front of him, shaking his head from side to side. But no one could see him. Good, Worm spat out this word with difficulty. That long and difficult 2 nights and 1 day. He watched Wei Wuxian stay awake, urging his Jindan to connect the spiritual power bridge between his and Jiang Cheng's to Danshan's, and watched as his surging spiritual power surged towards Jiang Cheng's Danshan. He recalled the bright young man in colorful clothes town who Wei Wuxian had chopped out sharp edges with a casual, trustworthy hand, teasing himself with the name of his sword, and on this barren mountain, who had given up all his swordsmanship talent for the sake of morality and righteousness, and who could no longer use his astonishing sword. Lan Wangji can only witness it with his own eyes and can do nothing about the real past. Wei Wuxian was captured and injured by Wen, and he was finally unable to restrain himself from pulling out the dust shelter, but could not stop anyone. A memory that can't be changed. Not a dream that comes and goes as it pleases. Wei Wuxian was thrown from the air by Wen Chao, and he vainly tried to catch him over and over again, only to fail again and again. He screamed Wei Ying hoarsely in pain, but he couldn't hear him. In the end, he fell into the mountain of corpses, dust and smoke rolled up, and there was no life. Wei Wuxian was sitting on a tree branch, and under the tree were the corpses that had been chasing him for the past few days. Blue Forgetting Machine sat on the tree, looking at the originally brightly smiling youth who was thin and indifferent, his eyes lifeless. Wei Wuxian held his head with one hand tightly gripped a branch. His fingertips became blue and white due to excessive force. His face showed a pained color, his mouth overflowed with a hoarse low roar. So noisy, so noisy. Good to hear. Wei Wuxian murmured deliriously. What's the name of this tune? Blue Forgetting Machine had a dazed face and replied, Forgetting Envy. Forgetting Envy, the name is from you and me. Then, he wrapped his virtual arms around Wei Wuxian on this tree and sang for him over and over again until Wei Wuxian fell asleep with a smile on his lips. Blue Forgetting Machine followed him every inch of the way, all the way to the voodoo cave. At that time there should have been no name for the cave. Wei Wuxian was covered in injuries and was suddenly tripped over. Blue Forgetting Machine still reached out to catch him. Wei Wuxian fell to the ground and saw a pipe, then pulled it out and continued to run away. He didn't know what it was yet, but Blue Forgetting Machine recognized the object at a glance. Ghost Flute Chenqing. In the voodoo cave, Wei Wuxian mobilized his yin qi over and over again to draw it towards his danshan. Extremely painful, but his only way out. Wei Ying, don't continue. The flute hissed as it continued to blow. Wei Ying, your body. Let's go back to Gusu. Wei Ying, the hissing and whispering shall not be responded to. The flute stopped. Wei Wuxian fainted. Not long. He was violently awakened, and then continued this 10,001 move. The Blue Forgetting Machine do not know what the situation. Only to see Wei Wuxian full of decadent dead, forcibly stripping the Jindan, or has it affected the Danshan? Wei Wuxian murmured. His yin dan would be dispersed. Evil key carved soul, evil key, carved soul. Wei Wuxian's eyes were devoid of any expression, repeating these 4 words without any consciousness. Wei Ying, no, stop. He trembled, unable to hide the color of pain. The suffering that these 4 words alone entailed was something that normal people couldn't imagine. But Wei Wuxian grabbed Chenqing and looked at it dead on, the color of madness in his eyes, the corner of his lips with an incredible smile. Evil key, carved soul, ha ha ha. He threw his head back and laughed, self-destructing everything. Clear tears cut across Blue Forgetting Machine's snow-white face, and his clear eyes were filled with pain. Wei Ying, warm dog, a warm dog. I, Wei Wuxian, will surely make you all beg for life with no way out, beg for death with no door. He said word by word, with a bloodthirsty and eerie smile on his face, replacing Chen Yi to his lips, a piece of eerie and ghostly flute music, hovering in this cavern. Wei Ying. At the end of the song, Wei Wuxian's eyes were covered with a layer of hidden fog. At the entrance of the cave, Wei Wuxian stopped his steps, and the tip of his foot was just a hair's breadth away from touching the sunlight. Wei Wuxian stretched out his hand, but then timidly retracted, barely pulled the corners of his mouth, and then his smile widened. Blue Forgetting Machine's heart is painful to the point of numbness. The Blue Forgetting Machine along with him down the mass grave, follow Wei Wuxian around to look for the life of the world. In the inn watched him sleep and wake up, watched him one by one supervision squatters killed Bloodwash, step by step to torture Wen Chao and Wen Yuliu. Then, he met Jiang Cheng and himself at that time. Lan Feiji said, Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian slightly sidled his head and said, Lord Hanguang, the one who killed Wen's disciples along the road, was it you? Of course, Jiang Cheng said. I knew it was you as well. How come you only kill one at a time and take so much trouble? Wei Wuxian said, It's fun to play with them. It's too cheap to kill them all directly. Kill them one by one, slowly cut them one by one. I haven't tortured Wen Chao enough. As for this Wen Yuliu, he had received the favor of being promoted by Wen Ruohan, changed his surname to join the Wen family, and was ordered to protect Wen Ruohan's precious son. He smiled coldly. If he wants to protect, I'm going to let him watch Wen Chao in his hands, little by little, become completely different, become inhuman, unlike a ghost. This smile was 3 parts grim, 3 parts cruel, and 3 parts pleasurable. Lan Wangji had witnessed him all the way here, but at that time, he was full of fear. So how could he know the inside story? What method did you use to manipulate these yin fiends? His tone was unkind. Lan Wangji could only so watch as his ignorant self and the bruised Wei Wuxian got into an argument. This path damages the body and even more so the mind. Wei Wuxian said, whether it damages the body or not, and how much I know best. As for the heart nature, my heart is my master. I have my own number. Some things are simply beyond your control. A hint of unhappiness flashed across Wei Wuxian's face as he said, of course I can control it. Lan Zhaoji took a step closer to him and was about to open his mouth, but Wei Wuxian narrowed his eyes and said, in the end, what do the others know about my heart? And what does it matter to the others? Lan Feike was stunned and suddenly said angrily, Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian also said angrily, blue forgetting machine. Do you have to go through with me at this juncture? Want me to go to the deep clouds and suffer the confinement of your Lan clan? Who do you think you are? Who do you think you Lan clan are? Do you really think that I won't resist? The two of them were steeply hostile to each other, since the beginning. Lan Wangji had been standing by Wei Wuxian's side watching. Lan Zan, let's part ways here. Zi Yingxiu. 13 years of playing the zither. Wei Wuxian was walking around in this place full of mists. Lan Zan, Blue Zan, Lord Hanguang. No response was allowed. Wei Wuxian also roughly guessed that this domain should be a dream or illusion realm or something like that. But without Lan Zan by his side, he was never at ease. There was light ahead, so Wei Wuxian naturally explored. Unexpectedly, after passing through the bright mouth, it was a mass grave. Lan Zan, playing the zither in the mass grave. Hearing the sound of the zither is the voice of the spirit. Wei Wuxian's complexion was condensed, and after reacting, he only felt heartbroken. Blue Zan is looking for him? Wei Wuxian ran to him in a few steps, but found that Blue forgetting machine could not see himself. Blue forget-me-not played again. Is it still there? Wei Wuxian replied, however, forgetting the machine piano in addition to the music played by Blue forgetting the machine, no half of a different sound. Where is it? Right here. Can return? I'm right here. Quickly bring me back to your home. There is no sound. Blue forgetting machine used to continue. Is it still there? I'm in. Blue Zan, where is it? I'm right here, Blue Zan. Can you return? Lan Zan, let's go back to Gusu together. Lan Zan, Blue forgetting the appearance of the machine is maturing day by day. He followed him out of every chaos, stepping on 1,000 mountains, across 10,000 waters. During the 13 years, time flowed and snapped back. He heard Lan Zikan tell him that he had already died in the Tao and his soul had disappeared, and received the ring mark whip. Serious injuries difficult to heal. The Blue forget the machine desperately struggling to imperial sword to the mass grave. Over and over again playing asked the spirit. Wei Wuxian eyes sour, want to say those 3 words, but swallowed back. He promised, between them, never have to say. Blue forgetting machine finally only high fever yuan brought back to the deep clouds. He bought an altar of Tianzi laughing. He wanted to know what Wei Ying's favorite thing tasted like, as if so he could see him again. But the Blue family can't drink well. He was drunk after just 1 sip of wine, and woke up looking for the flute. Wei Wuxian could only hold him in a false embrace. Lan Zan, Lan Zan. Lan Zikan gave him a tube of white jade flute, which he pushed away. Not this one, not this one. It wasn't the flute he wanted. What he wanted was the person who played the flute. Lan Forget Ji smashed open the storage room where Wen's belongings were collected and found a branding iron. Lan Zan. Wei Wuxian reached out to try to stop him, but only managed to pass through his hand and watched as he poked at his heart. Wei Wuxian recalled the annihilating pain near his heart under his collarbone back then, as if he smelled a pasty odor of burning clothes and skin, and the horrible smell of cooked meat, and his eyes blurred. Lan Zikan in the doorway watched his self-inflicted injuries with a look of astonishment and grief. Wei Wuxian squatted down and looked sadly at the bloody scar, knowing it was useless, but still gently went to help him blow on it. Lan Zan, it hurts, it hurts. Why are you so stupid? The undying sky, swords and swords in the chaotic battlefield. Wei Wuxian watched as Lan Wangji plucked the strings of his zither and desperately pushed away the people around him, searching for his own figure. Seeing the unstoppable bright red in his senior sister's neck, and seeing himself go crazy, putting together the yin tiger amulet, and being unable to distinguish between the enemy and himself. In the end, before he collapsed to the ground, Blue Forgetting Machine, drenched in blood, pounced over to catch him. Hard to pull out the dust. Endure injuries will take him on the dust to follow away. Later, he exhausted himself and landed in the deserted mountain, and placed himself in that cave. Blue Forgetting Machine held his hand and channeled spiritual energy for himself. Wei Wuxian squatted on the side of Blue Forgetting Machine, his heart aching. Wei Ying, how are you? Where are the injuries? Come back to Gusu with me. Wei Wuxian had never heard his voice so terrified and hoarse. Scram! Blue Forgetting Machine lost his voice in an instant, and he was flanked by Wei Wuxian's hatred of his own self at that time, and the pain was so great that it was incalculable. Why couldn't he come to his senses then? Why didn't he have control? Lan Zan, why did you save me? But at that time, it was impossible for Lan Wangji to hear. He continued to say to Wei Wuxian in front of him, Wei Ying, I'm not leaving. It's still dangerous outside. Let's go back to Gusu, okay? I'll protect you, said Lan Forgetting Ji. Good. Wei Wuxian finally couldn't suppress his heartache. His voice was sour to the core. Roll, double-eyed and godless Wei Ying said, you like Tianzi smile. I also prepare for you. You and I go back, okay? Good. Roll. Gusu is safe. When Blue Forgetting Machine asked a question, Wei Wuxian replied good, but the delirious Wei Ying only repeated the word roll. But he only repeats the word roll, and Blue Forgetting Machine only hears that roll. After 2 whole days, the Lan family finally found them. Wei Wuxian couldn't hear what the Blue family said. He only felt that everyone's faces were blurred, and only Blue Forgetting Machine's face was visible in front of him. I won't abandon him. It's me who has feelings for him. Even if he doesn't accept them, I'll still give them. Cham. Speechless. I will not retreat. Elder, please fight. 33 injured elders. 33 ring mark whips. Lan Zan. Wei Wuxian hugged the kneeling Lan Wangji from behind, wanting to block this ring mark whip for him, but the whips passed through his body again and again, leaving an indelible scar on Lan Wangji's back. Since the beginning, Blue Forgetting Machine has not defended himself. Lan Zan, he cried. At that small stagecoach, Wei Wuxian realized that he couldn't move or speak. He could only watch and see himself and Lan Forgetting Ji get into an argument, leaving behind a sentence to leave. Lan Zan, let's part ways here. We'll be together for a lifetime. The wind swept by, and the sky was filled with flying leaves and sand. Hey, under the tree, after a big fight with Blue Forgetting Machine, Wei Wuxian laughed coldly and casually grabbed a fluttering leaf from the air, pinching it in his hand and playing with it. The first time I saw this, I was in the middle of the night. 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 Wei Wuxian picked up the leaf in his palm with his 2 fingers and put it into the wind, leaving alone. Since embarking on this path, has already made such an intention. Why do you need to hold any delusion that you shouldn't have? His thin silhouette was all alone in the wind. Blue Forgetting Machine realized that he could move. He looked at that lone faraway Wei Wuxian, reached out, actually grabbed Wei Wuxian discarded fallen leaves. He looked down at the fallen leaves in his palm. Deep within the line of sight, another hand picked up the fallen leaves and threw them to the ground. Blue Forgetting Machine looked up. It was a familiar smiling face. Wei Wuxian's lips smile spread. Footsteps just blocked the Blue Forgetting Machine to look at Wei Wuxian line of sight, and then one hand on his cheeks to pull his head to look at himself. One hand held over the Blue Forgetting Machine's hand on his chest. Wei Wuxian laughed. Lan Zan, don't look at him. Look at me, touch me, see? Did you touch me? That one is fake. This one is real. It belongs to you. Lan Feike rubbed him hard into his embrace. Wei Wuxian's hand wrapped around his back, but he didn't dare to tighten it hard. He would always think of Blue Forgetting Machine's blood wounds from whip after whip, and eventually, his arms hooked onto his neck, offering his soft mouth and tongue. A kiss without lust, full of love, the other side of what they hear and see, no need to ask. Each other's heart clear. Wei Wuxian peeled open the collar of Blue Forgetting Machine, saw that has been scabbed 13 years of branding. Leaned over and kissed gently. Blue Forgetting Machine only feel neck and shoulder have wet hot but cold touch. Leaned down to kiss Wei Wuxian corner of the eye. Both woke up, still in the quiet room, looking at each other a smile. The past has disappeared with the flow of years, and thereafter forget the rumor of envy passed on to the world. End of entire text.